the decision that I made was that social media is littered with people and things and fakeness, and this one's driving that car and this one's got this much money and this one's house, and you're always told don't believe everything you see. Like with me, my biggest thing has always been about being transparent and being open and being honest. It feels like a foodie holiday, even though there's restrictions. I think you look at the ones where we don't eat. Rosh Hashanah, there's nice food. Hanukkah, there's nice food. But Pesach, there's just something about it. There's something about the tradition and the story. And the story of Exodus is one of the most well-known stories in all of religion.
Welcome back to Really Jewish, our conversation about what it is to be Jewish. Back for another listen. Welcome back. If you are joining us for the first time, Bruchim Habayim, welcome. We are Yair Eldan and Oliver Joseph. I am religious, a rabbi in the UK. Yair is secular, a law professor in Israel. And we're talking about big topics that affect the Jewish world. Today, we're talking about food. Sometimes when things are a bit rough, you just need something tasty to make you feel better. And do we have something tasty for you today? We're talking about Jewish food. We're talking about what's really Jewish about food. And we've got our first guest on Really Jewish, Ben Rebuck, previously known as Vegan Ben, a big Instagram star. And we're going to ask him a little bit about what's really Jewish about food. So welcome back to our 6th episode. Yair, it's almost Chag. It's been a crazy time. This feels like a bit of a break from reality, like delving into passion of food and memory. Tell us a little bit about a favorite recipe that you have.
Listen, first of all, I'll spare you from the stories about the emotional food, me and Adassa, my wife, have after sirens, We have the siren of 11 p.m., we take the kids back to bed, and then, my God, we're taking everything in hand from the kitchen. But, I'll spare you that.
Emotional eating.
Yeah, the emotional eating is crazy nowadays. But, for me, Jewish food for me is something, very basic, very homeish, very mom-related in a way. So I would go for my matzah brai. I eat matzah brai. Although I rarely eat matzah these days, I'm too old for this. It doesn't make me feel good, but I don't. The matzah brai is a must, and I put the matzah in milk and I fry it with tons of butter, and then put on the egg and scramble it. Everybody has his matzah brai, but that's my matzah brai, and it's great. What is yours?
So for our people listening for the first time, maybe matzah brai is basically like an eggy matzah, like an eggy bread, but a matzah version. Pretty staple, especially if you have small kids, because breakfast is hard during Passover if you're not eating regular cereals. I think I have to tell a story first. I have a dentist I go to, and 2 years running on Passover, before Passover, I went to the dentist. Actually, the first time it was the second day of Passover, and he's like, he's a non-Jewish guy. He's like, the Jews are coming to me on Passover because they eat matzah and it breaks their teeth. There's something about this cement matzah that breaks their teeth. And then the next year I went back, and it was 2 days before Passover this time. He's like, the Jews come on Passover. The matzah always breaks their teeth. And I'm like, no, we haven't even started Passover yet. It's the stress of the approach of Passover that's so stressful. My teeth are literally breaking. So that's my... the craziness of this time of year. For those of us who are scrubbing and preparing for Passover, there's a tradition of spring cleaning it this year, but an intense spring cleaning where you rid your whole house of all of the crumbs. And that's both stressful and for some of us, a lot, too much even. No, to answer your question, my association with Passover is my mum's fried fish. It has to be, because she had this enormous, like kind of arm's length, big kind of cast iron pan, and she would fill it up with 17 bottles of oil once a year, and she would fry fish for almost a day, maybe not a day, but certainly 2-3 hours, and she would make fish for the freezer and fish for the festival and fish for the neighbor, And she would always like have this like very strong association, like the whole house is going to stink. It's going to stink for days. My hair, I'm going to have to bathe 3 times before I get this smell of fish out. And once a year, she would just do this extensive frying. And it was amazing. It was like an amazing, like really connected memory to the preparation for Passover. And we'd eat fried fish on Pesach.
Listen, I remember when I spent a year in London for the Jewish community, and I was addicted to it too. As a secular Jew, I ate a lot of fish balls. I don't know. I mean, English Jews like fish balls, and I have to admit, I love them too.
So we had the double fish balls. We had the fried fish balls, and then my mum called it the chopped fish balls. They were like not raw, but they were, I guess, maybe boiled. And we do have a particularly strong connection to fried fish. So without further ado, we're welcoming our guest today, Ben. Ben can be found both on his Substack and on Instagram, Ben Rebuck. I recommend both. He's cooking loads of food for Passover at the moment on his Instagram and other social media platforms. And his Substack I found really meaningful to read. And we're really grateful to welcome him this week to Really Jewish. Thanks so much for joining us. We are talking food, Jewish food. And Ben, you're a phenomenal Jewish person on the circuit with hundreds of thousands of followers on the various media platforms. I've been reading a bit of your Substack as a way to prepare for this interview, which has also been like meaningful and emotional and actually quite pseudo-rabbinic, if not rabbinic, in the way that I read you and your deep connection both to our community and to food. You're a dad. You've been doing professional food blogging by way of social media for quite a few years now. And you'd definitely be up there, especially in a UK context, as one of our lead voices in the Jewish community and Jewish influencer on social media. It's lovely to have you, Ben. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's nice to hear those things back sometimes. I think maybe I downplay a little bit of like the impact that I could potentially have, and sometimes when you stop and you listen and you hear it back, it's quite cool. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you here. Yeah, you want to kick us off with the first question for Ben?
Sure. Hi, Ben.
Hi.
I thought about, transitions. I think transitions are interesting moments in our lives. I mean, I had transitions with regard to food, Jewish food, especially Pesach. I mean, nowadays I rarely eat matzah at all because it's not good for me. I mean, I'm old enough to refrain from matzah, and suddenly I like borscht. I never ate borscht. Now I like borscht, and obviously I like the knedled chicken soup. But I'm just curious about you. Did you have any transitions, either with regard to Pesach food or about your Jewish identity when you think about it? I mean, they're intertwined.
Sure. Look, I think outwardly the biggest transitional thing that I had is that my page and my content and everything I did when I started was all plant-based, because at the time I was. So for me, you use the term transitional, and yeah, it's very like I went from being plant-based to now not, which was a big thing. It's something that I talk about quite often. It's something that I wrote about. So I think that transitional moment for me really came around doing that sort of stuff. But it was important for me to kind of tell people that I had stopped being plant-based for the reasons that I've publicised. I'm not going to go back into them because it's, I've talked about it a lot, and, it's one of those things that it was my personal choice and all of that. But I think, going back to specifically about Jewish food, I made a very, I guess you would call it an informed, some people might call it misinformed decision to, really be overt with who I am and what I'm about. I think the biggest thing for me with social media, and it does tie back into what I just said about why people always say I came out as non-vegan. I think it's a bit of a ridiculous way of saying it, but whatever, it makes it a little bit more of like a bigger thing than it was. But, for me, I think the decision that I made was that social media is littered with people and things and fakeness, and this one's driving that car and this one's got this much money and this one's house, and you're always told don't believe everything you see. Like with me, my biggest thing has always been about being transparent and being open and being honest, to the point where my wife will tell me, like, why have you told people that? Like, you don't need to tell people these things. I'm like, yeah, but it's like something that's going on in my life. It shows that I'm a real person. Like yesterday, I posted that I had like a twinge in my neck, and I'm like, how annoying is it when you wake up and everything's fine, then all of a sudden you're moving like this and you're rigid. And, it's just one of those things that yeah, I am a real person and I suffer from real life things and whatever. And one of the things that not that I suffer from, but one of the things and the biggest thing about me is that I'm Jewish. And being Jewish has always been something for me culturally that is incredibly important. It's shaped my whole childhood, my whole life. Life was always centered around the Chagim, and would we be going to Israel to be with family? What would we be doing for this one and that one? So, as much as I grew up in a fairly secular thing, being Jewish was always really a huge part of what I wanted to do. So on social media, it made sense that would be the kind of angle. Ultimately, kind of, I guess everyone needs a niche. What I do isn't necessarily groundbreaking. I make food. A lot of people can do it, but the thing that they can't do is they can't be me. They can't have my lived experiences, my unique experiences, and part of that, like I said, for me, is being Jewish. So actually, I think it was about 4 years ago, I really went in, and actually it was for Pesach. Pesach is my favorite holiday as a Jew, and I think a lot of us feel like this, which is, it's funny because it feels like a foodie holiday even though there's restrictions. I think you look at the ones where we don't eat, Rosh Hashanah, there's nice food, Hanukkah, there's nice food, but Pesach, there's just something about it. There's something about the tradition and the story. And the story of Exodus is one of the most well-known stories in all of religion. And I love the Prince of Egypt. It's
But I
amazing.
imagine, did your family actually clean in a very crazy way towards Pesach? Because I, as a child, hated Pesach because I was religious, and and it was crazy. I felt that I'm trapped in this crazy OCD chag that was, everything was forbidden.
I think I probably had an experience which wasn't as like cemented in that kind of
Right.
orthodox level. I think growing up, like we had a kosher home, but it was like kosher to an extent. We bought kosher meat, and we didn't mix milk and meat and things like that. Like we were by definition kosher, but that it would be lax. For me, like growing up, I didn't have to. I don't remember koshering the home for Pesach. I just remember that horrible, like, multicolored Pesach cereal that we used to eat, and I actually liked it. So it was always like a nice excuse. So yeah. So what I was saying was the Passover content was the first time about 4 years ago that I actually really opened up about my Jewishness on social media. So it kind of has, I suppose, a special feeling for me in terms of how I talk about Judaism, because I think it's a story that people know. People know about the story of Moses and how that works. So yeah, it's always interested me.
So let's go straight there. I think one of the striking things of your Substack was you mentioning like a final comment where you say, showing up, feeding each other, making space. That's how we endure. There's something about Jews taking up space, which you're like really focused in on. And it's nice to hear where that transition happened, that 4 years moment around Passover. Passover for me is all about identity. It's about like reclaiming our identity and like reanalyzing and understanding what the identity is that we're like coalescing around, that we're centered around. So let's go there. Tell us one of your favorite recipes for Passover, or a favorite memory. You'll have to read in the Substack or online what the actual recipe. Tell us a little bit about the association with Passover food.
Aside from that multicolored Fruit Loop style cereal, I think
Disgusting. I have to, for the record, I just have to say disgusting. They're all disgusting.
I think it's corn. Is it? It's like a corn
Nothing good.
syrupy cereal. Yeah, not ideal. I think, look, growing up, like I loved charoset. Charoset was one of the things that I really looked forward to. We'd usually be at either of my grandmas. I had a grandma who lived in Israel and a grandma who lived in London. It was either at someone's, someone was involved with it. It wouldn't necessarily be my grandma who had hosted, but she would always bring a lot of the food. She'd bring her chicken soup. She'd probably make the charoset if it was whatever. And I loved it. It was, it was the sweetness of the table with the bitterness and all that other stuff. So I always like that kind of balance. And the halal sandwich, we did it in this country. It was matzah, charoset, and the horseradish. I think it's been interesting this year, having done a whole series on Pesach again. Everyone's saying, oh, well, for charoset, we do it this way. For chazeret, we don't use this, we use that. You've done this wrong. The maror is this and that. We don't use parsley, we use celery, and it's like we're ridiculous. We're a ridiculous group of people. Can't agree on anything. It's the two Jews stuck on a desert island and they build the two synagogues, so they say, I'm not going to go to that one. I do my Jewish restaurant reviews, and at the end of every episode I say 2 Jews, 3 opinions, I've given you mine. But my favourite Passover food, to actually answer your question, is this kosher for Pesach torte that I made a few years ago, and it's become probably one of my most recreated videos, so much so that I had a message from someone the year before last. It's been out. I've reposted. I normally repost it every Pesach because it's nice to remind people. I haven't done this year because I focus on something different, but people are still messaging me being like, I'm making the torte, everyone loves the torte. But I had a message a couple of years ago from a woman who said that the base of the torte is ground almonds. So she messaged me saying, I've got to tell you a funny story. I'm in the supermarket, I'm looking up and down in the baking aisle, we're looking for ground almonds. I'm looking and there's another woman there, she's looking for ground almonds, and there's another woman there looking for ground almonds. And one says and it sounds like a quip, but I have the message, and she says, are you making Ben's torte? And they're all making the kosher for Pesach torte. So for me, doing something like that, which has literally transcended borders and has been a part, it's a real special feeling for me that there are Seder tables where my name is being brought up in a way that's like, this is this guy that I follow on social media, he does really cool Jewish stuff, he developed this recipe, we're making it, we're trying it, and knowing that kind of at the same time around the world a lot of people are eating something that I've kind of done. Like it's a nice feeling to kind of, I guess, be a part of people's Seder nights. It really does actually feel quite special. So that has to be, of course, my all-time favorite Pesach recipe.
It's great to talk about food. Food is such fun, right? Food is fun.
It's important at the moment to also talk about food, Ben. We're led emotionally by this podcast, and to try and both stay in the Jewish journey that we're both in, but also in some way or other respond to the world outside. And there's something very joyful about food, even in these quite difficult times, certainly in Israel and here. There's something joyful about talking about food and being in food and having moments where we eat nice things, which take us out of some of the toughness.
Okay, so I'll be the downer. Obviously, Jewish food is about the Jewish mother, the representation of home, something very, very warm. But I wanted to take you on something else that I think characterizes Jewish food, which is the separation it enforces on us. I mean, in Israel, between secular and religious, my parents can't come to my house and eat on Pesach. On Pesach, my house is closed for them because they keep kosher. And what is your take on that? I mean, food is supposed to be connecting people, but Jewish food, in a very weird way, is actually separating them.
Listen, I think, I understand. I have a lot of friends and people that I know who are strict kosher, and I understand why they do it. It feels for them like it brings them closer to Hashem, and I don't disregard their beliefs at all. It's not something that I think is necessarily kept up with the modern world that we live in. I think it's probably quite difficult now. I see a lot of these people when they're traveling, there's one kosher restaurant here, there's 2 things there, and maybe some people will eat vegetarian restaurants, but a lot of them won't. They won't even go into a restaurant and order vegetarian. They just, and I experienced something similar when I was plant-based, going to places like Spain where actually you ask for something that's vegan and they say, oh, we have the chicken, because the chicken's not meat, it's something else. And, I've experienced what it's like to be abroad, particularly in these moments, like you say, that bring you pleasure. Holidays and traveling and, spending time with family and the things that bring you pleasure. I'd be on holiday eating bread and tomatoes and salad when people are enjoying, roasted this and fresh fish. And, I got to the point where actually it started to bother me. So, yeah, look, but ultimately, if people want to keep kosher, I fully respect their decision because it's something that they believe is the will of Hashem, and it's their choice. I will never disregard someone for it. It's a shame in the instance that you said that you can't share those special moments, and I feel the same, honestly. Sometimes, there's things that my wife doesn't eat that I eat, and I'm like, I'd love for you to try it. And
Right.
she was like, I'm not going to try it. And it's the same feeling. Like food for me is my love language. Like if I make something, like try it. Like I want to give you a spoon, like of the beginning of the sauce and the end of the sauce, and I want to talk you through what I've done and how I'm going to make it a little bit better if you said that, oh, I actually don't like it right now and whatever. So, you know, it's the same thing. She won't eat things that I make because she doesn't like certain things, and, you know, so I guess I know that feeling. I think we all probably experience that. So, yeah, yeah.
So I'll take us to a slightly different area. We are running up to Pesach. It's a festival of identity. You're a strongly identified Jewish person online. You've made this transition from vegan Ben to Ben. You've now reviewing both restaurants which are kosher and also restaurants which are not kosher. Tell us a little bit about what it has been like. You know, you're our first guest, you're our UK guest. What's it like to be Jewish in the UK right now? What's it like to be Jewish online at the moment? Tell us a little bit about the last couple of years for you.
Yeah, I think I would be lying if I said it's been an easy thing for me to do. I think I take a lot of it at face value that, you know, I heard someone say once that the angry dog barks the loudest, and it's always sort of resonated with me that, you know, people who are angry are going to shout about it. But I've never experienced, despite the amount of anti-Semitism I get online on a daily basis, you know, when my videos do well, I mean, it's an hourly basis, if not minute by minute basis. It's intense. But never in my life has someone come up to me in the street, be like, I follow you, you're a Jew, I hate you, or whatever. It's just, it's idiots on the internet, and I take them as that. Like, I don't value their opinion, I don't hold their opinion as anything worth listening to or accepting. And, you know, sadly, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, like whatever people want to conflate it as, has become a norm in society again. That being said, in the UK, yes, I think there's some problems, but I also think they're easy to avoid. I don't live in London anymore. I've moved out to Hertfordshire, and I live in, you know, a heavily Jewish area, and I don't feel it. You know, I go to my local high street and there's 2 kosher delis, a kosher butcher, you know, kosher cafe. Like, you know, there's things here that, even though, again, like I don't keep kosher, like I'm surrounded by people who have similar values to me. And I think as a community, we've always done that. We've always kind of stuck together. We've lived close by to one another. And for me, that's always felt a little bit easier. When I go into London, when I go into town, like I do feel there's this air of something looming, but I felt that for years. And I don't think it's just about Jews. I think it's a whole cultural shift in this country that's happening. And, you know, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. It's, you know, you look at reform, you worry that these people are using our name to say, oh, we're friends of the Jews, but, you know, I know that they just hate us less than they hate everyone else at the minute. And, you know, I don't appreciate being used as a like a tool to try and bring people on board. So it's very difficult. Like I said, I don't experience a lot of it literally in the outside world. Social media is always going to be a place for people to hide behind screens and do and say whatever they want. And I think part of it is good for people. I think there's a freedom of speech, and that ability to be able to do and say what you feel there's a part of it which I agree with. But obviously when it leads to rampant anti-Semitism and hatred about, particularly when I'm talking about food, you know, I do a series where it's Jewish fusion food. So, you know, I'll mix something that I consider to be Jewish with something that I consider not to be. So like a shawarma bao bun, or like a schnitzel in like a banh mi sandwich. And people will comment, be like, schnitzel's not Jewish, banh mi's not Jewish, you're stealing things, you're colonizing this. I'm like, it's fusion. If I made an Italian like sushi, or like, no one would care. Like, people care about Jews so much more than they care. Like, we're held to such a ridiculously high standard on the internet. But you know what, like, truthfully, like, I know that, and I play into it, and I do this series because it rages people, and it's good for my engagement, and I'm talking about things that I want to talk about, and all the voiceovers of these videos are you know, a real sort of FU to the haters, because I'm saying, like, yeah, I know what you're going to say, and I don't care, but schnitzel is Jewish, and I'm going to tell you why it's Jewish, and if you don't like it, you can do one, basically. So it works well for me, and I'm having fun. So yeah, no issues for me with that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And Ben, what about the inside Jewish community. It was so interesting to hear about how do you cope with the environment. But what about the connection between the Orthodox, Reform, and Conservative Judaism or Jewry in England? I'm not aware. I mean, I as an Israeli, I don't know a lot about it. But how do you actually maneuver between these two currents or three currents inside the Jewish community?
Yeah, it's the older I get, the more I realize like every Jewish community does their own thing and it makes sense to them and people. I go to a Masorti synagogue, and the amount of people when I say I go to Masorti, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I've always gone to a Masorti synagogue, so I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what I'm talking about? So there's that, there's that whole, we make things difficult for ourselves. We do things between the Ashkenazis, the Sephardics, the Mizrahis, like, the Beta Israel, whoever it is, we do things all differently and it's confusing for us. But, I don't necessarily feel like I have to navigate it per se. I think I know where I kind of sit on the spectrum, I guess. We actually did go to an Orthodox synagogue originally, not ultra Orthodox, but like it was Norris Lee, which is quite Orthodox. And then we moved to Masorti because there was more of a family feel. There was, we could kind of sit together a little bit and, there were different services run by different people. And I think it came from a more like a place of like secular thinking. I think Masorti is quite like thought-provoking Judaism. I think there's a lot of like, yes, this is how we're supposed to do it, but we think maybe we can do things differently and see how people like it. And I've always quite liked that. The synagogue I grew up with had a great Rabbi Jonathan Wittenberg, who I think does a lot of the like high up in Masorti. And actually now the rabbi that I have as a member of still a Masorti synagogue in St Albans, Rabbi Adam, I never remember how to pronounce his surname.
Zagoria Moffat.
That's the one. He's an amazing person, and the way that he speaks and the way that he delivers parshas. I was at a service a few months ago, and it was a bar mitzvah of a 13-year-old boy who was Mario obsessed. He loved Super Mario, was wearing like a Super Mario tie, and the dad was clearly a big gamer. And the rabbi delivered the whole parsha and talked about how actually the sermon of that week had similarities to the Super Mario film, and to go above and beyond. Whereas like I saw a few people look around being like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Like, no idea. But I could see like the way that the kid's face had lit up and the way that Rabbi Adam's face had lit up. Like he had clearly, I think he's a bit of a nerd as well, so it was great for him. But the way that he was able to bring something that brought joy to the bar mitzvah boy, like that kid will never forget that, that he went above and beyond. And I think that's an amazing thing that, he can do. And it's something that I don't think will ever forget either. And I don't even care about Mario. So, I think Judaism is something that inherently I've always had. It's always been a part of me, but I had to find it in the space that worked for me. And that's what I like to tell people as well, that you're a Jew, whether or not you like it. You do a DNA test, it will tell you that you're a Jew, and you can't really run from that. But you can be as Jewish or as non-Jewish as you want to be. If you want to keep kosher, you want to go to yeshiva, you can do it, and you're allowed to do it. If you want to have a bacon sandwich on challah on Shabbat, you can do it as well. Like, nothing's necessarily going to make you more or less Jewish. And I think that's why when I'm talking about these things on social media, like, I come from a place of what to me feels like authority for my level of Judaism, so to speak. I'm coming from a place that I understand if you want to be at the top and I understand if you want to be at the bottom, but I don't treat you as the top and I don't treat you as the bottom. I treat you as all the same. I will eat food in your kosher restaurants, but I will also post a recipe where I'm cooking non-kosher food, and I will mix milk and meat because I don't keep kosher, so it doesn't bother me. If it bothers you, it's kind of your problem. So yeah, there's ways to navigate it, but for me, it's just always been about doing what is genuine to you, and the rest all kind of falls into place.
So we're going to wrap up. It's, I'm sure, a busy time in the run-up to Pesach. We've been following your Pesach-themed content up until today. Looking forward to the next slot. Just part of this podcast is that you and I are both dads at different stages in parenting. Tell us about being a dad, how that's changed you, and maybe leave us with a note of hope as we transition into Passover.
Yeah, I think being a dad has been... It's been a real shift in I guess the way that I see other things. the biggest kind of experience that I've really noticed it. I know it sounds a little bit trivial. There's a TV show called Euphoria, and it's something that my wife and I watched actually before we got married, and it's about teenagers in America in like this generation now, and it's all about drugs, and it's all about sex, and it's all about all these like they do crazy things, and like this one gets killed and like whatever. Like it's a crazy, like it's a drama, but like it's sort of real life about how they use social media and, you know, all the sort of bleak, you know, life that they have now. And we loved that show. And before we got married, it was great. And actually there was a song for there that my wife ended up walking down the aisle to. It was great. We rewatched it about 2 months ago, and I was like horrified watching it. I was like, I can't believe, you know, my daughter's 2.5 now, my son's 6 months old, and I'm watching this. I'm like, they're in for all of this so soon. And I didn't enjoy. I mean, it's a great show, but I just didn't enjoy it in the same way that I did a few years ago. So it definitely has shifted my perception of how I see like the bigger picture. And obviously, like, I'm worried about the future for children, but, you know, in the flip side, being a dad has been the most amazing thing, you know, having these little things that kind of just look at you with, you know, they don't know anything yet. You know, I'm lucky that they're still quite young. Like, they don't know about the world and they don't know what's going on or anything. And, you know, all they want to do is sort of shower you with love and affection. And as someone who thrives off that, for me, it's, yeah, it's amazing. The last thing was the hope about Pesach, you said?
Yeah, just if you wanted to share your message for Passover or one message of hope before we go, that would be lovely.
I always think if you want to feel amazing in and around Seder, Passover, just you have to watch The Prince of Egypt, because it's the most amazing film with the most amazing music. And it always brings me such, like, you know, there's so many people who haven't seen it, and I'm like, how can you not have seen it? It's an incredible film. So yeah, that's my hope. My hope is watch that film and listen, because I think it tells the story of the Seder and the story of Exodus in such an amazing way that, yes, you can do it and you can talk about it on Seder night. To watch it and to hear the songs and the music, they've got Ofra Khan. That's my hope. My hope is that the story of Exodus and the story of the Israelites is one of resilience. And, you know, it's always, I think a few years ago, it was the story of Pesach was, you know, let my people go, which felt very apt for a number of years. Now that you can see it could be 40 years of wondering and, you know, not knowing what's next. But, you know, as people, we always overcome. Yeah, I think Seder, Pesach, the whole thing reminds us that it's bitterness, it's sweetness, it's resilience, it's new beginnings, it's everything. So it's real life lessons. So, yeah, I love the story, always.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Our honour to host you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And Chag Sameach.
Listen, it was so great to have this conversation with Ben. I think I missed asking Ben about the origins of his recipes, his view about Jewish food. Where did it come from? Because I feel that my cooking, my ability to feed my kids, you know, obviously come from my mother. My mother was my feeder. And it still is, in a way. Food is connected to motherhood, in my view. It did change when I became older, but I missed asking Ben this question. What about you, Oliver?
No, I think I really enjoyed it. Listen, we're experimenting in a way of really Jewish to like bring a guest and use the guest as a text in many ways, because we've been used to up until now bringing a Jewish text, and today Ben is our text. And I think I relate to that part. I think he is somebody who is really focusing his life around love of food. And there's something about food in our Jewish tradition which is core, which transcends boundaries. You know, like we're talking in the interview about some of the boundaries between the religious community, the secular community, and different kind of graduations of that. Something about food which transcends some of those community divisions and even transcends boundaries. You know, he was talking about a woman in the store buying ground almonds and how there's something that he loves of sharing content online where people are cooking his dishes, you know, at many tables across the world. And that there's something quite wonderful about that, because especially in these times when I don't think life is easy for many Jewish communities around the world, something about that love of food which is just nourishing and enriching and really, really connects us, you know, like you say, both to family, to mother, to parents, but also to each other.
Yeah. But I mean, when you think about it, I think why is there is a fuss about Jewish food. I mean, Jews are obsessed with food. Everybody is obsessed, but Jews especially in a way. I mean, and I think it's connected to the fact that we were Jews at home. We felt that we can be ourselves only at home. And food is connected with home, so it is a very big part of home. So I think that's why food became such a big thing for us. And when you think about it, in Israel, where you could be fully Jewish, and I think still, it's crazy to say that, but in 2026, the only place that you can feel totally, utterly Jewish everywhere you go is Israel, the only place in the world. And so maybe something about that is shifting in a way because, food is, becoming something different. It's not the same as before, the Jewish state.
Yeah, there is something about the cultural spread. There's something, Jewish food being fashionable, being trendy, trending, on social media. No, I always think at this, when we talk, having this conversation about Jewish food, Natalie and I my wife and I have like a little chuckle at Christmas, because there's often a thing like around online and in the newspapers and in a cultural way of lots of people getting really stressed about Christmas because there's like 12 people coming to the Christmas table and there's loads of courses to cook. And Natalie always says, what are you talking about? It's Shabbat. Like we do this every single week. Like, put on 3 or 4 courses and like have, 10 or 15 or sometimes even 20 or 30 people. And in a Jewish context, it's very, very normal. And there's something about in other parts of the world, and this is not, true to all communities, but in other parts of the world, just the aspect of putting on a big spread is somehow complicated. Something of, at this time of year also, like at this time of year, I find I need to remind myself to breathe. Because in our house, we're better at it, 10 years into our relationship almost. But it can be very stressful trying to organize around Pesach. Now, 3 kids at home, both of us working. It can be incredibly stressful. I think I also wanted to get into the conversation about some of that division between our religious lives and our secular lives, because I find it tremendously important and significant in my life that on Pesach, tochel matzot, that you're going to eat, that I'm going to eat matzah. That on Seder, I'm going to put 3 pieces of matzah on the table and say the bracha over that matzah, and that eating of that matzah is going to be meaningful. And all of the other food culture and food items that surround that kind of important moment of making hamotzi, making the bracha on matzah. Of equal importance and in many ways of equal weight, and maybe even more weight at Passover, is the cleaning of the house. Is shelo yir'u kol se'or. You're not going to eat any se'or or chametz, any of the forbidden Passover items, the 5 grains, what we call chametz in your house. That's also important, the no stuff, the things that we don't eat. But I think you, Yair, see things quite differently. And already in the interview with Ben, kind of waving your flag of protest. This is too much, this is too stressful, and you have negative connotations with the Passover cleaning.
Definitely. I mean, I hate the no stuff. From the core of my identity, I hate the no stuff. I'm a yes person. But yeah, but I do relate to what you said about the Seder and Passover with regard to identity, the questions, and what Ben said, I think was it's very true. That he is something about his Jewish identity and his connection to the Masorti movement is about exploring, is about critical thinking, is about examining his Jewish identity, and I relate to that as well. And when I think about Passover, I relate to, there is something about freedom, there is something about freedom of the thought, about liberation, obviously, but also about, also victimhood, the feeling that bechol dor vador shekamim aleinu lechalotenu, which I find
to translate,
that every generation Jews are being condemned to be threatened by people who want to kill them, and I mean I find that part of identity which is problematic. I mean, because it makes you close, makes you be suspicious about other human beings. It's true. I don't say it's not true. History says that, but still, I'm not sure I would put an emphasis about that. So, but I just want to say another thing about the Seder, which relates to what you said, about being with family. And I think what happened to us in the last few years, with Corona and the wars in Israel in October 7th, it really forced us to make a small Seder. And I love it because not everybody could come, not everybody could actually share the same table. And I have to admit, I love it. And I think there is something to it that is related to the biblical Passover. And there's a very nice article I read by Yitzhak Brand, which says that there is a transition from biblical times to rabbinic times, from to chavura, that Pesach is being transferred from the family originated to more
community.
It's bigger. He's writing about the Ban Pesach, about the sacrifice, but you can actually say the same about the Seder itself. So I think there is something about a small Seder which is wonderful. It's intimate. It's, you get closer, and it actually, in a way, makes you more Jewish.
So tell us 2 words about a small Seder in your house, because I like this image. We're also having one very small Seder this year. Tell us.
So it's going to be me and Hadassah and 4 of my 6 kids, because I have one daughter which is in Sydney. She's going to move to London. She can't go back to Israel because there are no flights. My older son is going to be with his mother, and my soldier son is going to take a break and come to Seder with my parents. So we're going to be, and also my younger brother is going to be there. So it's going to be intimate, not all the chamula, not all the wider family, and we can have a very intimate conversation about the issues, about life. It's wonderful. What about you? How is your Seder going to be?
No, it's interesting. I have to say that I struggle at this time of year because it's complicated to negotiate family. It's complicated to find the right balance. I think it's an excellent description of how Passover's changed. I think a lot of people did very, very big meals back in the pre-corona days, and now we're used to doing smaller things. We are doing a big Passover Seder with my wife's cousins on the first night, which is our tradition, and which is lovely, but chaotic and mad, and loads of people and kids running around, screaming, climbing the walls. We have some of the cousins from America come in that our kids adore, and that's like wonderful to see. And then on the second night, it's me and my dad's partner and her sister, and it's small and it will be nice. And I think there is something of a quality of being together in that small space. And yet, I have to admit that I also struggle, that I feel the need towards like bringing everyone together and having another chaotic and mental Seder on the second night. Although where you are, Yair, you only have one because it's one night of Chag. So this is the differential between... I have to say, when I lived in Israel for 5 years, I always missed second night Chag because it's something that I grew up with. So I was always used to having a do-over. You have one and then you do something different the second night.
No, I mean, we have to wrap it up, but I just want to ask you, how do you cope with a second Seder? Really, that's crazy. I mean, how do you do it? How do you actually manage to reframe it in order to actually survive it?
So listen, I love Passover. I really do. I love the story. I love the traditions. As somebody who lived without my mum for the last 20 years, it's a time when I feel very intimate with like family in that way, and with her. There's like a way that when you sit down at the Passover table that you are, literally, you said, from every generation, you're like sitting in the place of all of those starim, all of those Passover Seders of past years. There's something very special about it. The kind of memories flood back. I remember my uncle playing tricks on us at the cup of Elijah, one of the 5th cup that sits in the middle of the table, was actually being drunk by Elijah at the table, and the wine was going down. And I've never asked him how he did it, but there was this trick that he did that somehow the cup drained, or that's the image that I have, that there's some magic trick that was being played at the table. All of these things come flooding back. How do I do a second Seder? It's part of my DNA of that's what I'm used to, and that's what I love. And the second Seder always has a slightly different feel to it, and I love the songs and I love the music. And over the years, feel like I've grown into it even more and more.
I think my last thought is thinking about separation and inclusion. And Ben left us with a sense of inclusion. I mean, food as a connection between people. And I went to a different, vector of seeing food, and Jewish food in particular, as separating people. So I think, I'm going to be hopeful and go through thinking about food as a connector and not a separator between individuals.
So my final thought is that we had a rabbis meeting last week, and there was a bit of a thought tussle between a couple of the rabbis, and Rabbi Joel, one of my teachers, Rabbi Joel Levy, said Passover is about identity. It has to be about identity, not about tshuva, not about avera, not about repentance or sin. It has to be about identity. Something here that we've kind of come together on, that food is a very strong part of identity. And I think just to back up what you said, food can be a divider. There's ways in which that we sit around the table in the Jewish community. Often it's not the same table because we have different relationships with kashrut and of kosher eating, of Jewish eating. But there's a possibility here. And actually the overriding possibility is that actually amongst all of our food customs and food culture and shared recipes, that there's more, it's cliche, there's more that unites us than divides us. And maybe that's part of a thought to leave us with for Passover as we sit down at that table for Seder on Wednesday night across the world. The most observed custom of our current peoplehood, that what we share is the all of these dishes.
But promise me that we are going to do a chapter on kashrut.
Yalla.
That's a must.
Yalla.
We'll speak about that.
It's going to happen. Listen, to everybody listening, thank you for support. Please drop us a listen, a like. It gives me the opportunity to thank Oy Vavoy for our musical intro and our outro. Listen to their single, Back to My Roots, available on all streaming platforms. Thanks for being with us. Please share this episode with friends. Thank Ben and send him loving and kind comments on the occasion of this episode. Join our team if you want to come and help us create this Really Jewish podcast. And of course, support us on our Patreon account. Join us next week for more Really Jewish. We're going to launch on the same day next week on Monday. Join us again, Really Jewish, with Yair Eldan and Oliver Joseph. Chag Sameach.